Yair, Lapid, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you.
So we're here sitting down almost exactly 2 weeks into the crisis over Jerusalem's Temple Mount, a crisis that we've seen Israeli police officers killed in an attack launched from that compound. We've seen metal detectors erected. We've seen deadly riots. We've seen another attack on an Israeli family. And as of this morning, all security measures that Israel set up after that rolled back. Was that the right decision to make? What is your take on how the government handled it from start to finish?
Well, listen, I made it into a rule a long time ago not to criticize the government on international media, but I think there's no hiding from the fact that this was all mismanaged. Now, if we want to play the blame game, I would play the blame game against the people who are killing other people and saying this is our religion. I think I know my Islam pretty well to know that killing innocent people was never part of Islam. And this has all started with killing police officers who are not even Jewish in the Temple Mountain. And of course, the terrible, terrible massacre in Halamish, which was also a reaction to the events. So I think the conclusion we have is everybody has to be more careful about the Temple Mountain. This is, I mean, for the three religions, it's the source of all good, but can be also the source of all evil. And we have to be more careful. So if there's one thing I've been telling my government in Hebrew and in English is, let's make sure that any measures being taken in the Temple Mountain will be very careful and measured, and carefully measured, and also coordinated with the Jordanians, with the Waqf, with all the players who are there. This is not to say that Israel is not, doesn't have sovereignty over the Temple Mountain, because we do. It's Israel. Jerusalem is Israel. It is united, and it will always will be.
So let's not talk criticism. Let's take it one step further and talk policy. If you are a prime minister during this crisis, when you have metal detectors erected to ensure security that cause exactly the opposite over 2 weeks, what do you do?
Well, we have to admit to the fact that sometimes, especially during massive security events like this one, you can change policy. You have to be able to be quick on your feet. And so the one recommendation I will make to myself and to my government and to my future self to some extent is to make sure you have all the players around the table before you make decisions in the Temple Mountain due to the perils that are there. And I can't think of any other place in which the amount of interest, conflicting interests, of the size of the emotional part of the size of it, the history is that loaded, and therefore my first and far most important recommendation would be more careful with the Temple Mount.
But in this case, the Palestinians were left out of that negotiating table in the deal Israel struck with Jordan.
Yes, and it was so since 1967. The Palestinian Authority is not a player there. Let's make sure everybody is, we are all on the same page here. The problem started with Palestinians killing Israeli officers. And then there was an incitement that has nothing to do with reality. No one in Israel, and I'm not a part of the government, I'm part of the opposition, no one in Israel have ever thought about hurting Muslim feelings, about endangering Muslims' right of prayer in the Temple Mountain. They just said, you know, they just killed 2 guys over here, and we have to make sure nothing like this happened once more. So let's put the magnetometers on the Temple Mountain, because we see that there are the same measurements. There are magnetometers in the big mosque of Cairo. There are in
but should Palestinians
Saudi
have been
Arabia,
included?
in Riyadh and in Medina. They are in Bangladesh, everywhere. And the fact that the Palestinian incitement made sure that this would look like an attack on Islam is reckless and dangerous, and you can't blame the Israelis.
But should the Palestinians have been included both in the decision to set up new security measures and then in the resolution made with Jordan?
I think as I was saying, since 1967, Israel has, it's first of all, the Jordanians are traditionally the custodians of the holy places, and the Saudis to some extent, but they're not players here right now. And besides, you want to have a third party that is in charge. And this is the reason Israel has agreed throughout the years to give the Jordanians, the Waqf, a special position in Temple Mount. So people say, okay, these are not the Palestinians, these are not the Israelis, this is somebody else who's been there forever, and we know they're going to be, to some extent, impartial about it.
If we're talking about that attack that was launched from the Al-Aqsa Mosque itself that started this whole series of events, we're talking about 3 Arab-Israeli men who killed 2 Israeli Druze officers.
By the way?
Well, so overnight we saw those images, and you, I'm sure, saw those images, about 3,000 people turning up for the funerals of the men who killed those 2 Israeli Druze police officers. What do you think when looking at those images?
I think that the idea of Israeli citizens who are shouting terrible things about this country is dangerous, painful. We need not to surrender to this language of rage and hatred, and we need to be, and we need to be able to tell them, do you think this is productive? Do you think this will take us to a better place? You live here, you know us, you know yourself. And if you're talking about what we saw in Al-Fachem, and I think this was counterproductive in so many ways.
What do you do, though, as the leader of the country, when you see this very deep divide in Israel, and you see, in some cases, these deadly results?
Yes, we need, and we've been needing this for a long, long time, better policing in Arab neighborhoods. By the way, if you talk to Arab leaders, which I do often, they tell you, we need better police within Arab villages and towns. We need more law and order, not less law and order. And of course, Israel has to do a much better job in public policy, in explaining our case to the world. I don't think it's even a complicated case it's a complicated story to tell this time, because we were saying, somebody was killing Israeli police officers who are not even Jewish, so it's not part of the Jewish Muslim conflict, and we were trying to make sure this will not happen again. And what are you doing exactly? Are you demonstrating in favor of chaos, or you want to support law and order and the ability to coexist?
So, Yair Lapid, we've been talking about this 2-week crisis around the Temple Mount. We've looked a lot at inside Israel and Israel vis-a-vis the Palestinians. What about Israel and the outside world? Because this crisis, like any crisis around this volatile holy site, draws heavy reactions from the Arab world. In this case, across the Middle East, including Turkey, a spat with a country that Israel has recently reconciled with. How challenging is that to Israel abroad?
Well, if I may, I think the reaction in the Arab world, maybe with the exception of Al Jazeera, was not as harsh as we expected it to be. They are preoccupied with other things as well. Of course, they said the things that they need to say in such occasions, but the pressure was not coming from there. But you're right in saying that there is an exception there, which is Turkey. I believe that enough is enough. I think Israel needs to stop trying and reconcile with Turkey every 5 minutes. We have President Erdogan, who's an anti-Israeli, who's using a lingo which is sometimes on the verge of anti-Semitism and sometimes beyond, and who's made it, and he has become part of this Iranian, Qatari, Turkish axe, which is anti-Israeli. So we need to tell them, okay, we understand where you're going, so we can go to places we wanted to go for a long, long time, like supporting an independent Kurdish country, like saying it's time for us to recognize the Armenian Holocaust, where, I think us as Jews, more than other nations, need to do so, and we can have a policy that is, A, more moral, and B, acknowledging that there's something fundamentally different with our relationship with Turkey. So this is about Turkey. Looking at around us, the Americans were not playing a huge role in this conflict. There were concerns. I was in the middle of a meeting with the American ambassador, with David Friedman. He starts getting phone calls in the beginning of all this, and I saw how committed he was to try and make sure things will calm down as quickly as possible. And the key factor, I think, is our relations with Jordan, that has proven to be under very, very difficult circumstances, if you add to what happened in Oman a few days ago, proved to be solid enough at least to help us go through this together.
You mentioned David Friedman. We know Jason Greenblatt has been in marathon meetings since the Trump administration. That, at least publicly, has been made a very big policy priority. I've also heard a lot in this studio that from both Israelis and Palestinians that there is an opportunity here for some kind of reset. How do you take that opportunity? If you're leading Israeli government, how do you sit down with President Trump, with Jason Greenblatt, with Mahmoud Abbas potentially, and say, let's move forward?
Well, I've been saying since September 2015 that we need to go regional. Since the Oslo Accords, there have been 11 rounds of bilateral talks, all came down to the same nothing. I mean, it's just people sitting and lying to each other. I was involved in the last round because I was in the government and was part of the negotiation team, and it was tired people saying tiring things to each other. So we need to take a different path, and the best path, and this is also adequate to the changes in the region, is to go to a regional conference with the Saudis, with the Egyptians, with the Jordanians, with several Gulf countries, and saying, okay, let's have a round table of all the players, because anyway, you cannot talk about Gaza if you don't bring the Egyptians in.
And
You
that's
cannot.
despite the Saudi arms deal that you've criticized?
Yes, we have better informal relations with the Saudis than we had before. Of course, this administration is more than capable to talk with the Saudis and to bring them to the table. I think they're interested. Let me remind you that there is the Saudi initiative which says, if you guys are game, we're going to be game too. And I think this is the right path, because what we need now is different dynamics and different mechanism in order to be able, or to enable some sort of a very careful beginning of talks. Of course, everything should be subjected to the biggest principle that Israel's security is going to be in Israeli hands.
So let's circle back to Israel, because we are here after all, and you are a leader in Israeli opposition. During the course of this crisis over the Temple Mount, we've seen the Israeli parliament advanced two very controversial bills, one with the rabbinate sort of taking control over conversions to Judaism, another with a so-called nation-state bill that would cement the Jewish nature of Israel in basic laws. What do you make of that timing and what's going on in this right-wing government right now?
I think this is politics over policies. This is, the Israeli government got scared by the idea that it won't consider right-wing enough for its base. So they decided they need to promote several bills in order to flatter their own, the more, actually, it's not even the base, the real right-wing, the extreme right-wing. This is counterproductive. I'm all for a bill that declares that Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people.
Do you support this bill as it stands?
No, because the wording is important. Because this, for example, I'll give you one quick example. This wording is downgrading Arabic as the second formal language of Israel. This has no practical meaning except from the fact it allows them to insult Arabs. There are 20% of the Israelis are Arab Israelis, they're citizens of this country. We don't need to downgrade their language just in order to make sure somebody is, I don't want to say kiss ass to his own base, but I just did, so I guess. So what we need to do is have a bill that is, and we, by the way, we have put on Knesset's table, Yesh Atid, my party, put on Knesset's table a bill that talks about Israel as the nation state of Jewish people, that was actually written by Benny Begin, who's a member of Likud and the son of the late Menachem Begin, that will have the same result without the damage.
Yair Lapid, chairman of the Yesh Atid party, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Norit.